Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for setting this up. And welcome everybody to this all-party Africa Group meeting with the British Council on the Cultural Protection Fund. And I'm very pleased indeed that we are holding this meeting and that this particular problem is being addressed. And I remember in particular during the Iraq War, the devastation to cultural property that resulted in that war, and the determination that action should be taken in the future to protect cultural heritage that's at risk during conflict. And of course, also, we now need to be acutely aware of the effect of climate change as well. And I remember the actions that were taken just in the wake of the war in Iraq to try to make sure that this was protected in the future. So the Cultural Protection Fund is devised and led by the British Council in partnership with the UK government's Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and supports the protection of cultural heritage. And it's currently active in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Sudan. And also, I see, has delivered projects in Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia. And I'm extremely glad that it's in place and active. And we have to make sure that with all the pressures that are hitting us post-pandemic, that this continues to be supported. So in this session, we are going to hear about the fund and its work in Africa. And there is a film which is entitled Melting Snow and Rivers in Flood, on the way the programme is helping to preserve traditional belief systems while bolstering climate change preparedness in the region. So we will be seeing that film, and then there will be a discussion and then Q&A with all of us participating after that. So if I could start by introducing Stephen Stenning, who is the head for Arts and Society for the British Council and oversees the team running the Cultural Protection Fund, as well as the British Council's global programme of creative and cultural programmes responding to development challenges. So Stephen, if you could then take over at this point and introduce the film, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Good, good, good. I can see nodding, so that's all right. Thank you very much for this opportunity. First of all, as has just been said, my name's Stephen Stenning. I'm head of Arts and Society, and what that really means is there's a unit in British Council that looks at cross-art form work that responds to global challenges through supporting the creative economy, culture and development. And the biggest single bit of that has been our cultural protection work. So all I'm going to do is say a little bit about the Cultural Protection Fund, and then I'm really pleased that sorry, there's a phone going in the background. I hope that's not disturbing you too much. I'm really pleased that we're highlighting this much more through a project, and that we're looking at the Melting Snow video and then hearing a little bit more about the work in Uganda. I think it brings it to life by looking at an actual project rather than me just doing an introduction. But the Cultural Protection Fund, it's been an extraordinary joy and privilege for me. My background actually coming into the British Council was as a theatre practitioner, director, playwright, and then joined British Council as head of Arts and Society in the Middle East, North Africa in 2011, a very exciting time to find yourself in Cairo, with the so-called Arab Spring going on around. It was the events of that time and then what happened particularly in Syria that led, I think, to what is a really innovative approach, and started with a sort of cross-government conversation between the then Department for International Development and the Department of Culture, Media and Sport about putting development assistance money into cultural protection, inspired by the events in places like Mosul and Palmyra. The fund, I think, has been extraordinary. Set up in 2016, originally with 30 million of official development assistance, and focusing on 12 countries around Iraq and Syria. That spread to Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, in North Africa. And originally the logic was very much of protecting heritage at risk because of conflict. The statement that was made as it was set up was that it was to help create opportunities for economic and social development through building capacity to foster, safeguard, and promote cultural heritage in conflict-affected regions. I think that development assistance aspect to it has been key, actually. And as well as the objective of protecting cultural heritage, I think what it has revealed is that in doing that, there is huge benefit that can come very directly to communities through the valuing of their heritage, the protecting of it, and in some cases, the restoring of it as well. So the core sort of principles of the fund at the outset were about setting up an open and transparent system for projects to apply, for work to be based in the host country. So there were partnerships encouraged by the funds, but always needed to be connected locally, connected both to projects that were themselves at ground level, if you like, but also connected to the cultural infrastructure in those countries. So partnerships between expertise from the UK and Europe and local projects. And we've sort of, over that time, had a number of evaluations of the fund. I just without going through too much data, some of those outputs include that at the moment, to date, we've had about 280,000 actions to safeguard cultural heritage at risk across all those projects. Over 15,000 people have been trained in cultural heritage protection, 121,000 records created across what is now 17 countries that we've worked in. What I would say is that I'm deliberately, partly kind of for speed and concision, not looking to share presentation, but if anybody is interested afterwards, I can send a presentation and further information and certainly more data about the Cultural Protection Fund. As was mentioned in the introduction, we have moved to working also on cultural heritage that it is at risk because of climate change, and in part that is a sign that the wider value of heritage more and more has been recognized by others and has really come through as a result of the work of the Cultural Protection Fund. Tangible and intangible heritage has been recognized not only for the importance of protecting it in its own right, but as an enabler and a driver of sustainable development. And we started in 2020 with a pilot in East Africa looking at cultural heritage at risk through climate change. And initially that has spread the project to 5 countries across largely East Africa. We've announced this year further funding for projects that includes the project you're about to see the video from, and a panel discussion with the participants of, which it happens to be in Uganda, but there are 6 other projects that have been funded across both North and East Africa. And as I say, we can send out further details of all those projects, but I think it's a particularly useful way of getting a feel for the Cultural Protection Fund's work to highlight one particular case, which has, as you will hear, an interesting connection between work in Uganda and East Africa and North Yorkshire, and involves wonderful combination of organisations in those countries, including sort of coordinated by the International National Trust. So I will hand over now, I think, to the showing of the video. I think I'm roughly on time, almost exactly on time. Well done me. Yeah, over to the showing of the video now, I think. And Alex, I don't know whether you're going to be saying a little bit more in the way of introduction of it.
I won't. Just to say very briefly, I'm Alex Bishop. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll let the video speak for itself, I think, and then we've got a few remarks afterwards from our colleagues in Uganda and the National Trust before we open up for a discussion. So please let me know if you're not able to hear this. We have tested it, but one can never be too certain. But I'm hopeful that you're about to start watching the video for 13 minutes.
Emirimo mukulu nititashamba era banga byabulamu ngahanu mamashaba kuba tutashamba tulokona kuchikuweni obo mushya makola kuti utuhe tukakusaba utuhe maezi wangatokiri kulya bana abakuluba malamu obwangane natitashamba twanga homurekani kuba byabya hakeratu abatata bakina balere nalyalenja bali kumikayi ota no bulambu buno abasokulu bo bulambu bwe baba bakakolera mu migiri tonga babiri leto migiri ya bikushi yali kwa bana balere kundoka abashakulu bakatubere bakabuambu bwana matusala mwa kukenene tubalere nabasokulu bakabwa akana iko mujungu. Narusha etinyoranzoro bunitwa binyetu esanzoro sika kuma musiku esanzoro balangerisha mari yenya sikipeka bwambwetero moja mahika kulime yali yamana lisiaje yamabyo.
Because of the melting glaciers, but also because of unpredictable rainfall, we found there's a lot of flooding in 2018 and 2019. Their belief system is greatly at risk, and we felt it's important not only to try and retrieve what is left, but also raise awareness about the intangible cultural heritage attached to some of these sites.
Abasango babiri obunga bw'okwamoko kw'oluusi ebintu mu byasenda binene nerwo oluusi lwamabitwaleka bungi
ahantu hari eshandekere neryo ekyenyi kimusisuuza kyamaleta amabo kyamaleta esyangwangwa neryo kyamasa kyamabirabiri eshandekere shetu syebyahanu neryo kyamahwaho.
As someone born here in Rwenzori, I was surprised. We have so many cultural sites around us and people really respect them. We ask the people to work with us to see, first of all, how we can map, document and make these sites known. places of sacrifice, places of prayer. We were able to identify about 50 cultural sites, but most of them have been affected by the floods.
Our business is to care for heritage and make sure that it's safe, it's preserved, it's well known. So on the one hand, you have conservationists who are interested in biodiversity and climate change, global warming, concepts which are very foreign. And on the other hand, for different reasons, a community is contributing to those objectives by caring about their forests and making sure the water bodies are clean and they're not contaminated, because water is also considered sacred.
Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda is trying to work with the cultural leaders and the elders within the community to make sure that we use cultural knowledge to see how we mitigate the effects of climate. They told us that there are special types of vegetation that you can plant near the river. They can be planted by the spiritual leaders, and when the river floods again, it doesn't go beyond that kind of vegetation.
Before Christianity, many communities believed that the ancestral spirits resided in the forest.
Abakuru bakuru na balere balere okwa muwasu owemenye iringeyi.
I know.
The threat to heritage from climate change, it is a global phenomenon. I think the power of this project was to be able to look at both countries, very different countries, very far apart. I'm very fortunate to be the general manager for a World Heritage Site that has all sorts of protections and statutory designations. What the Ugandans helped us do was think about what was important to our community, not only the sort of grand Fountains Abbey, and a little example from the town just down the road from us called the Fairy Step. And those steps were converted during the First World War so that they could move tanks up the steps out of the river. They have no designation, they have no statutory protection, but taking that memory back to the First World War is really important for the community. So what we did was we adjusted our project, and that will protect that community value for the future. What we're doing is working at a landscape scale and working with the community, particularly our farming community, to do much more softer interventions, to slow the flow of the river, stop the erosion of silt and soil. And we found that is much more cost effective, but also is a way of spreading the message about climate change, that it is happening and it has an impact on the places that people love.
Most of these trees were underwater.
Yes, actually water was around this area from that spot. For us it was a matter of doing it like we are serving our people. Even people who are fishing here, when they look at what we are doing, they feel that something more is being done for them. Something small can do something big. This is my belief.
We have piled just stones which we have picked from the neighborhood, so it still allows the river to continue with this natural flow. This is quite a new concept to us that we learned about during our interaction with Fountain Abbey. We've also been able to train the communities in terms of flood management, the communities have defined ways that they want to run these sites and manage them sustainably.
Aya isadi mamua manaka youngshon kanu ngwatimo pinne gi cheke pinne gi begi nene wange ungo pom epong ana winji magoro keto babedo ka chwalo ywak mamua wacho juma kene mabi mako chingwa gin muketo giluonge wang lei bedo pokre pa nyipir ko nyabongo lei magi keti kingi magi tongi kingi kuom echo bedo nia jopa nyipir ka unu bi ai kuyo tungre tu chieng ubi loko duogo poduoko lweny
Fomo kun la unjire diotin makine ni kabere matontong oruge chako chidokecha gilego lega matontong kokonyo aniang maber makwe enike political significance any
what is suru matontong hipokrima kakecha mirario wanglei any for historic reason ediko wasu ne okonyo yomege spiritual echalo lega kauna winjo ne akaji tungwange maleng rech makre mapol leito dano ko twi
ya pada su
fon papier godo gile say nobody got in the got dobi kado upi ore country ga chanja itale ya tele ma ino
ibango ngenia pa pecha tie edo kot maduong de samo be meru ko pecha
wacho nia ipedi kukwach kwach ne de ene lembe sisheke makwash bimio malembe sisheke ini pir kunya bongo bichoyo ginam bichoyo gitung polisi ani kodi mwa luo wanyai kodude neni gitie jopanya bongo de gitie jopanya pir de tie eyo gitie weng gemaro.
We are proud to be part of this heritage. It makes us feel excited. Even generations to come will come and see this and they will know this is where Alur started.
Awinjo.
The government actually is responsible for caring for both natural and man-made heritage. More needs to be done to make sure that the spaces that are affected by climate change are understood by communities but are also protected by the government.
Vanemulengesia erheremet. Vanemulengesia ertendete matema. Mete yinyo kwa chisharara. Neresisia lengesia erheraho evendebet ngamerong. Ebe kalenda chisharara ertendenda chibiri.
Ikadi kindwani ko pimo airo njori wande wamade. Pimo ai kakae eribu kindwa weng. Ana winjire maber kadano shokra.
Well, thank you very much indeed for showing us that film and showing the impact this fund is having and the very useful work that's been going on between the United Kingdom and Uganda in this case. We're now moving on to a panel discussion, and if I can just introduce the participants in this, and because of a problem potentially with the line to Uganda, this has been pre-recorded. But if I can now introduce the speakers in this panel. There's Alexander Lamont Bishop, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the International National Trusts Organization. Barbara Babwetera from Uganda is the Executive Director of the Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda, and also Justin Scully, and obviously you've seen some of the participants here, who is the General Manager of Fountains Abbey, and that falls under the United Kingdom's National Trust. So if we can perhaps move on to the panel discussion, and then we'll come to Q&A after that.
So, having just enjoyed that wonderful documentary, we're going to move on now to a short panel discussion, just a couple of questions. I'm Alex Lamont Bishop. I'm the Deputy Secretary General of INTU, and I'm joined here by colleagues in Uganda and Yorkshire. Barbara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Alex. My name is Barbara Babwetera, and I am the Executive Director for the Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda, an NGO that works to promote an appreciation of culture as vital for human development.
Fantastic, thanks, Barbara. And Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin Scully. I work for the National Trust. I'm the General Manager of Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal up here in Yorkshire.
Great. And I'm just going to ask for about 10 minutes or so, just a few questions about the project and its impact on both of your organisations. And then perhaps we can open up to the floor for questions from our audience. Barbara, first question goes to you. I'm curious, this idea of bringing together climate change and cultural heritage, it's quite a new idea to me in some ways. Was it new for you in Uganda when we first started this project a couple of years ago?
I must say that it is quite an interesting and new phenomenon to us here in Uganda. Connecting climate change and culture is something that people feel is far-fetched. Thanks to the British Council and the DCMS for this support to Uganda to actually demonstrate the role that culture can play in mitigating climate change and supporting adaptation to climate change. Yes, indeed, it was new, it was exciting, and with great outcomes, I would say.
Great, and that's what I'd like to hear.
Doing this before? Yes, no one was doing this before, and it was also our first time doing it, and we are learning pretty a lot from it, and hope that the best will come out of this, that will inform learning across the country and across the borders.
Great. And what about with the communities that you're working with? You're obviously active now in 3 different parts of Uganda. How have they responded to this idea of climate and culture coming together?
I must say that it was quite an exciting engagement for the community, given that this was a community-led project drawing upon indigenous knowledge and practices of the people, and they knowing that this project actually identifies directly with their personal identity and the preservation of the environment that actually promotes climate conservation. The community was quite excited, and I must say that it has strengthened their engagement together with the local district leadership in preserving their heritage more and actually being on the lookout of the dangers that the destruction of the environment can bring to the communities and to their heritage generally.
Great. And we saw in the video some snippets of the Bakonzo people who live in the Rwenzori Mountains in southwest Uganda. You know, we understand from the video that there's a loss of cultural heritage connected to snow and ice because the glaciers are disappearing. Had the local community made this connection to climate change, like this big exterior force that's, you know, much greater than the sum of all of us?
I must say that the levels of knowledge between the connection between the climate change and the melting snow was a little bit low. But with the awareness creation that this project has brought on board, people have been now able to understand the connectedness. Obviously, let's say that the community was able to realize changes in seasons, changes in their agricultural productivity, which is one of the backbones for the country, but they didn't know the actual connectedness between the environment degradation and how it can actually affect their cultural identity as well as their cultural sites. But also, they didn't know the connectedness between the indigenous knowledge that they had and how it can actually contribute to the preservation of the snow that they regard as their god, as the place where their deity lives, that they have actually worshipped and lived with for more than thousands of years now. But with the support from the British Council under the Culture Protection Fund, they have now been able to realize, and they are up really to now protect their environment more using cultural practices and the indigenous knowledge that they have.
Fantastic. Thank you, Barbara. Justin, coming to you. What about the National Trust here in the UK? Are you finding that UK audiences are receptive to the idea that there's a link between climate and heritage? Is that something that you've built into the public understanding? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think we're building it into the public understanding. The Trust is completely clear that the biggest threat to our cultural heritage is climate change going forward. And obviously doing a lot of work on that at the moment with COP26 being hosted in the UK. What I think we're starting to do is to be able to demonstrate that the threat to cultural heritage is here as well. And it is to places that people value in the UK. It's not something that's happening on the Great Barrier Reef or over in Uganda, sort of something distant. We can make it feel local to places that are important to people.
Yeah. And Barbara, a part of this project focuses on policy development. You're in close discussion with Ugandan parliamentarians, and given that many of those kind of people are watching us now, I would just wondered, what's the parallel as we think about COP that Justin just mentioned, and you know, parliamentarians getting together to think about climate change? How has that message been received in Uganda? Are your politicians and the people from your political sphere, are they interested in that aspect of the project?
I must say that the parliamentarians we've engaged with, as well as the local government officials, are so much excited about this, and they're seeing it as a new strategy, a new alternative way to contribute towards the mitigation of climate change. And it's the way that we are engaged, we are triggering engagement with the parliamentarians to see how can they ensure implementation of the laws that can actually protect cultural heritage and at the same time mitigate climate change effects on the communities and the community cultural heritage resources. Great. So I must say that, yes, this is a new phenomena. It's a new engagement that actually is going to be scaled up to the parliamentary level in terms of ensuring that new legislation is passed to contribute to climate adaptation, but at the same time protecting our cultural heritage, because it's our identity, it's what makes us who we are, and at the same time, it provides a very rich resource to contributing to information and knowledge on mitigating climate change. And not only that, we will also scale it up and incorporate it into our education system to try and advocate for that, to ensure that the link between climate change and cultural heritage is clearly understood, and it's taken forward as one of the practical measures that are context specific that can contribute to climate adaptation and mitigating its effect across the country and the world.
That's fantastic. And in the current phase of the project that's active now, what are your plans to embed that piece around climate and culture into education?
Thank you very much, Alex. One of the programs that the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda has run for now almost 10 years has been around cultural heritage education. And we realized that in order to make it much more sustainable, there is need to incorporate a number of topical issues that are affecting the world today, of which climate change is one of them. So we are planning on incorporating education and culture into the education curriculum. We supported 4 universities under some other funding to develop a bachelor's degree in heritage studies. And this is one of the ways we feel that information coming off from this project is actually going to contribute as practical examples on how culture and education are related.
Great. And I think that's a fantastic outcome of this project, to be honest, that it can contribute into the exchange of learning. And it's always something we're so keen on as a member organisation that facilitates sharing and learning between our members, to make sure that knowledge exchange is embedded into everything we do. And so I wanted to come back to you, Justin, if I can. What are people at your site in Yorkshire, what have they been learning from our colleagues in Uganda as part of this project?
I think they've been learning a great deal. It might sound strange to link the two places together, but particularly the Rwenzori area in Uganda impacted by flooding, and Fountains Abbey, the biggest threat to the World Heritage Site here is flooding. So we can bring to the table practical skills in managing that flood risk. But what I think we've worked well with the Ugandan team is understanding how we relate to our community. And the CCFU are brilliant at this, that it isn't just, I'm lucky enough to be a general manager of a World Heritage Site. Of course, you can use that to demonstrate the impact of climate change on cultural heritage. But what we've also been able to do is work with the community to look at local places to them that don't necessarily have a statutory designation, but are really important to that community and a threat from flooding. And we can use that to help them understand the impacts of climate change.
Fantastic. I'm just remembering an image of that's actually, I think, in the video of the fairy steps.
And just maybe, Alex, just to add to that, Alex, is to say that we have also learned a lot from stakeholders and partners of national trusts in the UK, especially regarding natural flood management measures. This is something that we feel is a very good resource for us. And once we have completed this project, we will be able to demonstrate and in practical terms how Indigenous knowledge and culture can contribute to climate mitigation.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, we will be having some important discussions later this week. At the time of recording, we have just discovered that Uganda's off the red list, and we will be looking to make sure that we get some National Trust expertise in flood management over to Uganda this side of Christmas, so that we can have a really rich exchange of knowledge, ready to start implementing that work in the Rwenzori Mountains. And I personally am extremely excited about it. Okay, we're probably getting close to the point where we should think about opening up for questions. But before we do, this question to both of you, it's my hope that this collaboration will continue to live on. You're both members, very valued members of Into, and we certainly will be continuing to see each other beyond the lifetime of any project. If you think dreaming big, if you think about how we might collaborate together in the future, what kind of things would you like to see this project activity lead to, either in your own country or as an international collaboration? Justin?
I think I'd like to take this much wider. I think this parallel between differing World Heritage sites, differing cultural sites, exchanging knowledge across the world, I think is a really, really fruitful one. And particularly because I think it's so enriching for my staff team to give them an international perspective. And I found it, they've been so excited to do this work because it's so rewarding and interesting, and they feel that they're making a difference.
Great. And Barbara, what about you? Some blue sky thinking, where would you love to see this going?
I would love to see this continuing, and especially in the area of creating new knowledge and information across the borders, and also within the have anything really that connects culture and climate change. This project is providing the first opportunity for us to engage on that. So looking ahead into the future, I would love to see more research work, knowledge creation through research, and sharing of information across countries in collaboration with the different stakeholders across the world.
Fantastic. All right, well, thank you both very much. This is a pre-recorded interview, but I'm hoping that we all will be there live on the day, and we'll now be able to open up to any questions that those watching might have.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and I think that made a lot of sense to pre-record that, and that was a very, very constructive discussion. And for me, it's been fascinating. I have to say that it wasn't something that I had really thought about in terms of climate change. I mentioned at the very beginning that there was a tremendous amount of concern after the Iraq War about the cultural destruction, and I remember a colleague's private member's bill, and that was followed by government legislation to try to address this in terms of conflict. And I noted that the funding that you're talking about here only kicked in after we moved to the commitment of 0.7% of GNI for aid. And it has been, rightly in my view, defined much more widely than the former Department for International Development alone dealing with it. That there were so many aspects that needed to be brought in, and it was right and appropriate that DCMS in the United Kingdom became involved in that internationally. And you can see the benefits, both in terms of what Justin's just been saying about the impact upon his staff of looking at this internationally, and what Barbara's been saying in relation to Uganda. So now that we come to Q&A, and we are looking now at the cultural impact of climate change, something which I don't think has been particularly highlighted. I welcome people's questions coming in. I'm just looking to see if I've got ones in the chat. But I would like to just start by asking, and I guess this goes to Stephen, is this funding secure given the cut to the aid budget?
Thank you. Thank you. The direct answer is no, it isn't, and there are sort of conversations going on at the moment where the continuation of the Cultural Protection Fund and other aspects of cultural protection has been put to the Treasury, and there's a discussion going on at the moment between Treasury and FCDO about its funding and about its future funding. So actually, they are very live at the moment. So it's a kind of very direct question for me. I just wanted to pick up on a few things in the way you introduced that question, which I really welcome, because I think, as well as the value itself of cultural protection that is under threat because of conflict, and also under threat because of climate change, I think taking that wider view of development that you just described is important for all sorts of other reasons. You do get to see very real and very direct development benefits that come from this sort of work, not beyond the vital importance, and not to undermine the vital importance of protecting the heritage itself. But in doing that, you do see, I was privileged to go to places like Palestine and see how it is part of regenerating communities. It is giving people purpose, new skills, and helping sort of growth at a very direct and local level. And as you've seen from the video, the same is the case as we look at climate change at risk, heritage at risk from climate change, that you're seeing work that is in itself providing a kind of impetus for local communities. So I think it is a really valuable approach. But yes, the funding issue is live at the moment.
Thank you. And I've just put in the chat, if people want to flag, they want to ask a question, please put it in the chat, or put up a hand, you know, one of those yellow hands on the screen, or else just put your hand up. So just looking around. John Elder Sandwich, was that a hand going up, or just unmuting yourself? I'm going to assume that you're about to ask a question. So the Earl of Sandwich.
Well, I did put a question in the chat, which is, to what extent will the local community in Uganda cope with their own development? If funding dries up, I have a vision of outsiders being brought in if they're going to plant trees or whatever the developmental aspect is. So is this not a reality, that it's going to be down to the local people? And by the way, I really applaud the British Council's sensitivity to local culture, and that was very well demonstrated.
Thank you. Could I put that to Barbara? Obviously, we are fighting here very hard to make sure that funding is sustained, but could you address the Earl of Sandwich's comments as to what Uganda will need to take forward if that doesn't happen?
Thank you very much for that question. I must say that the support that comes from the British Council to provide a demonstration of the relevance of including culture and preserving cultural heritage is quite key. One of the things that we are trying to do, as my predecessor mentioned, is the need to bring government on board to appreciate all this and support the tree planting and the likes. But we also know very well that providing tree planting, is never given priority in the budgets as much as we would have loved to see. And I think all this happens because there is no demonstration that can show the need and the urgency. So what this British Council funding is doing for us is actually to create that evidence that we can use to engage with the government, with the parliamentarians, to be able to support and allocate some funding to this. So I must say that once this funding is cut short, the knowledge creation is also going to go down, and it will be a little bit difficult for us to present the evidence that we would use in lobbying and advocating for government's involvement in this. And I would say that using indigenous trees, they are more located in the protected areas, which are national parks. And therefore the need to engage, the need to even learn more, to learn more from other organizations that are doing similar activities like the Fountains Abbey would be cut short. So my prayer would be that this fund be maintained to create the knowledge that is required. And once that is in place, we will be able to lobby better with the evidence to the government.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Very, very helpful, and we will certainly do our best. Lord McConnell, Jack McConnell.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks to all the speakers and those involved in the video. It was excellent. I've got a couple of questions. One generally about the fund is this focus on climate change a conscious shift from the initial focus, which seemed to be a little bit more on conflict and post-conflict environments? And is that a marked shift in the priority for the programming on the fund? And the other one was really sort of looking not just at what we can provide by way of assistance and knowledge and advice and support to others in Uganda or elsewhere through the programs, but whether we can learn something back as well. And there's a lot of, I would say a lot of tension and a lot of issues in the UK today based on cultural identity and cultural history. And many of them are in places that are struggling economically or are affected by climate events. And I just wonder if there's work through the fund and experience from the fund that could actually be relevant for re-engaging with some of those communities that feel left behind in the UK as part of the government's levelling up agenda.
Thank you. Can I go first to Stephen, and then I'll come to the other members of the panel?
So, yes, thank you, Lord McConnell. The answer to the question about the move, I was going to say away, but we haven't moved away from the climate, from the conflict focus. But alongside that, I think it's important to say that that move came really through what I was speaking about before, which was the recognition because of this model of the fund, and in particular that need to work first and foremost with what's already on the ground. And thanks to the network that British Council have of not just offices in those countries, but largely offices that are staffed by people who are from the country and know and understand those networks. That meant we started to see the huge value that came with the work we were doing, and the huge value that came from sort of community-based activity around it. And so there was then the desire to look at work on protecting cultural heritage, not just where it was at risk, both geographically and themically, not just where it was at risk because of conflict, but also where the risk was climate change. And that was done just last year as a bit of a pilot for us. And alongside, we had a study running. And I think, the feeling that has come from that is it is a really important area, a really important way of both driving those impacts at a community level, but also protecting very valuable heritage. On the second question, I'll, probably that Alex and others are better placed. What I would say is I think that connection to the levelling up agenda is a really important one. The shared learning that I'm sure Alex will speak about is a vital part of it, but also addressing what are global challenges together, and some of the experiences we have across the UK of heritage and regeneration, for example, heritage and getting in touch with a sense of place. There's a lot of shared learning that could happen, as you say, in the context of the levelling up agenda, but I'll finish there.
Thank you. Alex, can I come to you?
Certainly, and thank you for the question. I think I mentioned in the discussion we had before that it's important for us at Into that all exchange of knowledge is reciprocal, and that's an absolute priority for us in anything that we're doing. And so when we first conceived of this project, together with Justin and Barbara's team in Uganda, we wanted to make sure that we were positioning it in such a way that there was something to learn in Uganda. Certainly, you've heard about natural flood management techniques that we'll be hoping to trial there in the next few months, but also something to learn about here in the UK. And Justin knows better than most, with his good understanding of the country, how that can work and how that can be implemented. So, Justin, I wonder if you would be happy to expand a little bit on what you've brought back, or what you've been able to bring to your communities in Uganda, in Yorkshire, that is inspired by work in Uganda, because I think it is a really valuable thing to hear about.
Yeah, I think that learning, bringing something back it almost relates, to the UNESCO designation of fountains. The UNESCO, basically, if you understand each other's cultural identity, that reduces conflict. And you've seen, the Trust has had a hard time in particular elements of the media in the last few months. But I think what the work in Uganda's done is challenged my team about how they think about others' cultural identity, and frankly made us look beyond our boundaries. That can be beyond a boundary all the way to Uganda, or it can be beyond the boundary of National Trust land ownership and looking at our communities nearby. And I think that's the biggest strength it's brought, is a perspective that we can look at both the economic value this can bring, particularly in the levelling up agenda, but also the strides we can make in cultural understanding can be really helpful. And the techniques that CCFU use over in Uganda are completely applicable back here. So yeah, I think it's very relevant.
Thank you. And Barbara, have you got any comments? Thank you very much for what you've put in the chat, which is very useful about the significance of this funding. Have you got any comments about on Lord McConnell's questions and points?
I must say that my colleagues have mentioned it. It has, we've had an opportunity to really learn from each other and also to demonstrate to the people that there is local knowledge or indigenous knowledge that can be tapped upon as a resource in terms of mitigating climate change, in terms of supporting a number of other issues. For example, you've heard in the video where the community members are talking about particular cultural heritage sites that are used in governance and dispute resolution and bringing the people together. So there is a whole lot of connectedness between the need to safeguard cultural heritage and at the same time mitigate climate effects, so that the community can actually demonstrate and express who they are, what they believe in. And from that, we could always learn a lot. We have been beneficiaries of knowledge from even other national trust organizations organized for us courtesy of the International National Trusts Organization to learn about what other national trusts are doing in terms of community engagement. How do we ensure that, how do we support the connectedness of the people with particular cultural heritage sites and even their leadership? I must say there is really a lot that has been brought to the table, and it will be very unfortunate if this prematurely comes to an end, or that desired impact, rather that desired outcome is realized that we could use to further our arguments.
Well, thank you very much indeed. We're coming to the end of our time now. This is certainly for me, has been extremely interesting and enlightening. I didn't know that that this project was going on. It makes a tremendous amount of sense to extend the protection of our cultural heritage from looking at conflict to climate, because obviously climate change is going to spark all sorts of conflict too. So trying to tackle this at this stage and doing this internationally is clearly extremely important, and this is a very important project, and you've shown us very clearly the effects of that and the working together between the United Kingdom and Uganda. So thank you very, very much indeed. This has been recorded, and so others will be able to access it, which I'm sure they will do. And the very, very best of luck with this. And we are battling here to try to make sure that funding does continue. So many thanks to all the speakers, to Stephen, Alex, Barbara, and Justin, and for giving us your time today. It's been extremely enlightening. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ben. Okay.